Now that you know what a conditional is and you can write if blocks and else blocks, it may have already occurred to you that sometimes logic is not so simple. It's a little more complex, and we may have a secondary condition that needs to be met after a first condition has been met so that more decisions need to be made. We can use nested conditionals for that. So the outer one acts like the gatekeeper. If the outer condition is false, the computer is never even going to look at the inner condition. Let's take a look at an example where we have a ship that is docked and air pressure percent at 100. We want to check the air pressure only if the ship is actually docked. Let's start with the outside condition. If is ship docked. That's already a Boolean value, so it's going to be true or false by itself. So we'll say, if the ship is docked, and I'm just going to put a comment here for now, and then we'll say check air pressure. Otherwise, let's just print a quick statement that says docking not detected, airlock remains sealed. Okay, we're definitely not going to open the airlock in space. So let's go back to the condition where the ship is docked. We now need to check if the air pressure is good or not. So we'll have a second if-else. If air pressure percent is 100, we'll say airlock safe to open. Otherwise, we'll log airlock unsafe, pressure mismatch. Okay, one thing I want you to notice before we run this is the indentation. We always indent something inside an if or else block. So when we start to nest things, that means that we have to indent even more at this level. This is really important because you can imagine if I were to pull all of this back to the left wall here, that gets very hard to read. You can't tell which one's the primary condition and which one's the secondary condition. So instead, you use this indentation to make it very easy to read and to see that hierarchy. Let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. Airlock safe to open. So we have checked to see that the ship is docked and that the air pressure percent is 100. And so it executed this code and it skipped this and this because this was already true, these two. Let's change this and say, what if the ship is not docked? And we'll run it again. Docking not detected, airlock remains sealed. So we can see here that it completely skipped all of this because the ship was not docked. It moved on to here and printed the statement instead. What if the ship is docked, but the air pressure is not quite right? Let's run it then. We see airlock unsafe, pressure mismatch. So in that case, it actually did clear this, and that's true. So it moved on to this set of if-else statements, and it checked this and said, nope, that's not true. So it moved on to here and printed this one instead. Let's do one more. We have a fuel level of 15 and an emergency override that is currently not active because this is false. So we want to say if the fuel is low, we're not going to panic because there's no emergency override. So we can just print a statement for that and say everything's good. Otherwise, we need to check and see if that emergency override is active, and then we might have two different outcomes for that situation. So I'll say if the fuel level is less than 20, and again, I'll put a comment temporarily and say check emergency override. And then the second part for the outer condition, we'll just print a little statement here. Fuel levels nominal. So inside here, we now need to have a secondary condition. So I'll say if is emergency override active, then we'll log fuel low but override is active. Continuing mission. Otherwise, if it's not active, we need a warning message. Alert. Low fuel. Immediate refueling required. All right, let's run this. And we see alert, low fuel, immediate refueling required. So let's change this to show that the fuel level is higher. Let's say it's 25, and we'll run it again. And we get the very last message, fuel levels nominal. So as long as the fuel level is good, we don't even need to execute any of this. It can just move on and execute this instead here. So let's change it where the fuel level is in fact less than 20. Change it back to 15. And let's say that the override is active. And we run it again. And it says fuel low, but override is active, continuing mission. So again, we write this outer statement, and then if this one's true, we have the inner set of statements, and then one more condition to decide whether this or this executes. This is how you can have more complex logic with these nested conditionals. Just make sure you do that indenting to make it easy to read. I'm going to do my quick git commit here. Make sure everything's staged. Completed nested conditionals demo. Okay. Right here next to the demo file, we have a practice file where you can come in and write some of these more complex conditionals. And you'll get a little bit of extra opportunity not only to practice writing the syntax, but thinking it through in the first place, which sometimes is the harder thing. You have to have the logic. Now, these instructions have done it for you a little bit. This is pseudo-code, is what we call this, where you write it out in a structure that mimics the way you'll probably structure it for the code. So that's going to help you. But you do want to think it through very carefully and make sure that your code works no matter what the combination of values are here. So definitely do like I've been doing and test it with different values. All right, that's all I've got for you. I will see you in the next one.